Hi, welcome to video 5. Our next problem is called less than 100. The goal is, given two numbers, return true if the sum of both numbers is less than 100, otherwise return false. And we've talked about those primitive types. I mentioned Boolean values, which are either true or false. That's what you see here. A couple examples as usual. You can see that this sum is 37, so it returns true, and this sum is 117, so you should get false. Let's go to the code. Here is the function they give us with us to fill it in. Again, I don't like the meaningless names, so I'm going to change them to one thing about this example and this method name. They call it less than 100. The problem with this is that if your threshold ever changes, then you have to rename this method. So I wouldn't name it like that. I would call it less than threshold, or in a real scenario, you would have a meaningful name instead of just threshold. It could be a temperature or anything. So, but I think I have to leave it for their processes here. So we'll do that. I am going to incorporate a previously used technique though, where we're not working with magic numbers. We're going to use a constant. This time I'll use constant instead of the read-only. And I'm going to call mine threshold. Again, I use all capital letters for these. That's a common convention. I'll call it 100 since that is what we're using for the problem. So, if you remember too, in one of the earlier videos, we had an addition method that we already implemented. And so this problem is based on the result of an addition. Now, while this is completely excessive here, I'm going to demonstrate an idea that you would do normally. So we could leverage that method we made previously. Let's just repeat it here. Addition, I think they called it, and I'll just name these something different just to show you that it doesn't matter what they're named. So we got this method addition that we had already implemented, and it was simple. It was just return one plus the other. And so you can see that as you go on and develop your class, you can sort of compose your new methods out of ones that you already have. So in this case, I'll call it a sum. I think maybe the last method was called sum, but that's okay. We'll use addition num1, num2, because num1 and num2 are what is provided in this scope between these braces. In this scope, it's called num1 and num2. It's not op1 and op2. Those will be passed in when this is called. You'll also notice that I tried to switch it up a bit and show you another access modifier. This one's private. I did that on purpose just to show you. This couldn't be accessed outside of this program class. You'd get an error if you tried to use it. Think of the private methods and variables as sort of like your internal scratch pad. This is where you get to do all your messy bookkeeping and adding, and you don't really want to present that sloppy kind of stuff to, or even if it's not sloppy, just the sort of details that people outside don't really need to know about. They don't need to know how you do it. And so we've got that to produce our sum. And the other part of the problem was to compare the sum against the threshold. So previously I've been just sort of returning answers, and I could do that here. I'm trying to make these spelled out a little bit more to maybe see the flow a little bit better. And you can see the Boolean type. Boolean we'll call under, and we'll set that equal to sum is less than the threshold. And then you can simply return under. And that's a Boolean. That's what this method is looking for. And so I think we did that all right. So we'll give it a check. Uh-oh, we had an error. So we have an error on line 12. Oh, yep, do you see what it is? I got the access modifier. I optionally made it static, but look at, I didn't include the return type. That's definitely a problem. Our addition method was meant to return an integer. And really I could have read more of the error. So, yeah, okay. So if I would have read more, I would have seen it directly said there's no return type. Good. I think that's fixed. Let's try it again. And there we have it. That was a success. So, again, this part was probably a little excessive, but it just shows you that we can sort of build these up, build on our previous work, incorporate it to do more complex things. And I'll copy this for when I refresh and it all goes away. Just note let's replace this. Again, I wrote out more than I really needed to here. Instead of creating this temporary variable here, you could just as well return. So, and technically you don't even need the sum. You can replace that. If you want to be very concise with it, just be careful how complex you get for any given line if you try and combine too much. It's nice and small. You should keep your methods very small, but there's sort of there can be diminishing returns where you make something very hard to read and understand when it gets more complex. I don't think that's the case here, but just be aware of that. We'll check that just to be sure. I'd like to end on those happy notes. And that should do it for this video. Thanks again for watching.